Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Concord Township Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, January 2nd to order. We have a public hearing scheduled for today, as well as a zoning amendment application. What we'll do is we'll follow the agenda this evening. The first item on the agenda is the zoning amendment application. We are going to look at accepting the zoning amendment application number 1217-1 by Vincent Urak, requesting to rezone 2 acres of land at 11473 Concord Hamden Road and being current permanent parcel number 08A01400000110 from THN Town Hall Neighborhood District to R1 Residential District. And then we are to schedule a public hearing. Okay. Is the applicant here or not? No? Okay. I didn't think so, since there's nobody here. I'm gonna ask. Is there anything we need to know about this application, Heather? Anything in particular you'd like to give us any information on, or is it pretty straightforward?
No, the applicant had inquired as to what the zoning was on the parcel and had asked about zoning map amendment procedure a few months back. So I sent him information on that, and then on December 19th, he's filed a zoning map amendment application with our office, which is why it's being presented to you this evening. And in order to follow the Ohio Revised Code, we must have a public hearing within 20 to 40 days of receipt of the application. So, based on that, it appears we're going to have a special meeting outside of our normal first Tuesday of the month. So we were looking at January 23rd, if that fit with everyone's schedules.
Anybody have any comments on the commission on this? Questions? Comments? All right, well then I will...
I do have one, Mr. Chairman, just out of curiosity on this. Is there any issue with what it looks like on the map as that parcel will be a residential zone parcel, kind of landlocked? I don't say landlocked because not really landlocked's not the right term, but within the middle of the town hall neighborhood, adjacent to the town hall commons. It's not adjacent to any of the other residential, unless I'm not reading the colored map correctly. It's not, looks like
it's not adjacent to
it's not
any
adjacent to
other
any other residential. It's in the right, it'll be right in the middle of the town hall. Is there any issue or concern with that?
Well, I think we could bring, I think those are issues we can discuss at the public hearing. You know, I think that's a good point, and something I think we should bring up in the public hearing and deliberate that. That certainly is a concern, so we need to take a look at that when we have the public hearing. So,
Yeah, I'm not opposed to having the public hearing. It was just a
right.
question I had when I was looking
Right.
at it. I was like,
Yep.
you know, usually don't like zoning to be one little lot right in the middle of, you know, a much larger zoned area.
Well, that'll be Mr. Urak's job to convince us otherwise.
Right. My question is, for the applicant is, what's the motivation, what's his interest or concern?
Right.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, obviously, as you know, the purpose tonight is just to schedule the public hearing. We'll
Right.
get into all the
Yep.
details, any questions, and have the testimony from the applicant during that hearing.
I will entertain a motion to, in the affirmative, to accept the zoning amendment application.
So moved.
We have a motion made.
I'm sorry. You might want to include the accepted and set it for a hearing.
Oh, okay. Make a motion to accept the zoning amendment application number 1217-1 for public hearing on January 23rd.
We have a second.
I second.
We have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let the record reflect there are none opposed. Motion carries. We'll have the public hearing on the 23rd, right, Heather?
Yes.
For the 16th, it's on the, versus the 16th, it's on the agenda.
I have revised the agenda.
Updated agenda. Yes. this stuff here. I'll just, Stephanie gave me a bogus package of information, so.
You can't trust the lawyer.
Never, ever. Okay. All right. That's item number 1 on the agenda. Okay, item number 2 on the agenda is a public hearing for the following text amendments. And they are listed in the, on the agenda. I'm not going to read through all these. We'll kind of tackle each one as we get to it. But we have approximately, or exactly 11 text amendments that we are going to review. And Stephanie, with regards to the procedure, do we vote on each amendment? Will we vote on
You'll
acceptance?
open the public hearing for all 11,
Right.
and then there will have to be a motion for each individual amendment for their different chapters.
Right, so what we'll do, so the board understands, we will have a public hearing for all of these text amendments. Hopefully we'll get through them all. And then as we deliberate each amendment, we will then have a roll call vote on the acceptance of that amendment. We'll move to the next amendment. But this will be a single public hearing that will cover all 11 of these text amendments. So if we don't get through this, just for everybody's information, if we don't get through this evening, we will, just do a continuation of the public hearing until we can get through it. But since there's nobody here and it doesn't look like there's going to be much public input on this, I would think that we should probably be able to get through this, this evening. So, Heather, you want to give us any information on text amendment number 1?
Sure. So you all received in your packet the correspondence from the Lake County Planning Commission in regards to their recommendation on the amendment. They held a meeting on December 19th, 2017 on the proposed text changes, and the Lake County Planning Commission recommended that the text amendments be made with the following changes. And then they went through each of the 11 sections. Some of them they were recommending approve as submitted, and others they had some recommendations for your consideration this evening. So I'm more than happy just to kind of walk you through those and give you staff's input on whether we should consider or not consider adopting those changes, and we can have discussion on those. So I'll just kind of walk through here. We look at Section 5, the definitions. Their first point was to change all references to cul-de-sac with hyphens, because currently, as we have it listed in here, it does not have hyphens. If you turn to page 5.21, you can actually see where this is, where they're referring to. So under street types, which is definition 187, in subsection A, we reference cul-de-sac, and also in subsection E and F. So that would be fine. We could go ahead and make that change with the hyphens. Do you guys agree? These should be there.
Okay.
Is there a consensus from the board if we were to vote on that tonight, that we should make that amendment? Or do you want to wait until the end?
What's that?
We
Was there
can't vote in public hearing. They
Oh,
can't-
okay.
They can't indicate.
They can indicate, okay, all right. All right, the next point, they indicated, determine how many gallons of distilled beverage you wanted created on site. And for this, I think they're referring to our micro distillery definition, which is found on page 515.
Right.
And that is definition number 126. We do already set forth in the definition a maximum brewing capacity of 8,000 gallons per year.
Right.
So I don't think we really need to make any changes based on that.
I agree.
Great.
And then moving forward in the definition section, the next bullet point was to delete unless approval has been granted for a shared driveway, in which case the driveway may serve multiple uses from the definition of driveway. This is on page 5.6. they continue to state that the language is unnecessary because we are adopting a separate definition for shared drive. I think it's fine, staff believes it's fine to leave it how it is, and that we really shouldn't make a change there. They also, the next point was to revise the parking area definition, and this is found on page 5.16. At the bottom of page 5.16, it's the last definition, number 145, parking area. They're suggesting that we change that the parking areas should state any improved ground surface area rather than any paved ground surface area, because we do allow gravel as a choice of surface in a residential district. So like in the R1, if you're typically not in a subdivision, you have the choice to do a gravel driveway or an asphalt or a concrete driveway. So I do agree that we should consider changing paved to the word improved in that definition of parking area. The next one had to do with the definition of private street, which is found on page 5.20. The Planning Commission stated that in street private that we should delete or accepted by Concord Township Board of Trustees and/or is not maintained by the township. This is because the township trustees do not accept roads per the ORC, and other government entities such as the county and state maintain the roads. The definition describes what private is without the language that is suggested to be removed. So basically, if we modify the street private to a right-of-way that has not been dedicated for public use, period, and then strike the remainder of the text. The thought was that that would be an adequate definition, and that would be an acceptable change if we wanted to go ahead and do that.
So we're gonna basically then at the end of public use, we're gonna put a period there. And
That's
then we're
what
gonna
we're
strike
suggesting.
or accepted by,
Mm-hmm.
everything after that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And you're okay with that?
I would recommend that.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right.
The next one was use the term site instead of properties in the definition of street, public, also cul-de-sac and loop street, because properties implies real estate, fee simple or condominium, and a driveway can be used to access an apartment or multiple stores. This is on page 520. Oh yeah, this is for public street, which is also on that same page.
Is that on page 520?
Right.
186?
Yeah, and 520, and then it also carries over to the next definition. However, I think we're fine leaving properties and changing it to site. It really isn't necessary.
Okay. So we'll nix that one?
It would be my opinion that we don't need to make that change.
Okay.
The last bullet point under the definition section, they state that winemaking is considered an agricultural use under certain conditions, and that Madison Township defines winemaking as a permitted use, winery, and as an exempt agricultural use, viticulture. They're suggesting that we look at the definition of or Madison Township's definition of viticulture for exempted agricultural uses, and we may want to add that to our definitions. They define it as the agricultural practice of growing grapes, grapevines, and grapes. This includes making and selling of wine as per the Ohio Revised Code 519.21a, and the production of other grape-related products, including but not limited to jam, jelly, vinegar, oil, and juice. And this has to be in reference to our new definition of urban winery. But I know in our definition of urban wineries, we're specifically stating that the grapes or the juice that's used to create the wine is solely coming off-site. So what we're regulating is not an agricultural use. We're regulating something something that we are permitted to regulate. So I don't think at this time we need to include in.
I don't see any reason why we would include it. We don't have any real property available in that general district to be able to have to have grape vines or fields of grapevines in them anyway. I doubt that, our interest is in attracting somebody to build a vineyard.
Right.
Our interest is trying to attract somebody to bring in a business, urban vineyard. So I don't even see how this is pertinent to what we're doing. So, but I agree. I think we've got the definition, I think, covered with regards to what I think where we want to be with that.
Okay, and then moving along, under section 11, the zoning permit section, they had 3 recommended changes. The first one, if you refer to page 11.4, they're stating that we need to add references to the trustee resolutions 1972-21 and 1976-11.
Okay, Heather, excuse me.
Yes, sorry.
Now, do you want to, now we're moving on to amendment number 2 at this point, correct?
Right, but we're still in public hearing, so before we can vote on anything, we'll close the public hearing, and then the commission can vote on each one individually.
Yes.
Right?
That's fine. As long as you leave the public hearing open for all 11, and then your comments will be addressed to each individual section, correct? Right. So your first comments were addressed to the definition section, your next one is concerning the next text
Well,
amendment.
can they vote? Can they vote on the amendment
No,
number
you'll
1?
have to wait
Okay.
till the public hearing's closed for all of them.
Right. So we're just going to, okay.
We'll
I just
talk
wanted to make
about-
sure
yeah.
procedurally,
Yeah.
because now that we've discussed
Mhm.
the recommendations for amendment number 1, so then I would assume then, Stephanie, that we would like to,
If anybody has anything to say in opposition.
right, and then what we would do is we would accept the amendment as amended, or with the changes recommended by the Lake County Planning Commission?
Not until after the public
Right,
hearing.
but I'm saying, when we're ready to do that, then we would,
Right, so
incorporate
after
these
the
changes.
public hearing's closed for everything, there would be a motion to accept
Right.
with the revisions made by the planning commission and as recommended by staff to amend that chapter.
Right.
Or that text section.
okay,
And then you would vote on one, and then you do the same thing for the next one.
right, okay, makes sense.
And-
All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, and Stephanie would, you'd have to specify
Which ones were accepted?
which amendments
changes,
you're
because
accepting
some
from.
of-
Okay,
some
so
of them
bullet
were
points
not-
number 1 and 4, or whatever it
Yes.
is.
Because some of them were not accepted.
But what I have, okay, so on section 5, definitions, I have point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as being accepted in, and the other ones were not, based on your recommendation, is that correct?
Right.
That's what I was
That's what I had
recommending, but
also.
you guys obviously
Right.
can have your discussion after,
Right.
and then.
But I'm saying
make
your
that decision
recommendation
on
is
the
1,
board.
5, and 6, so 3 out of those. Okay, so let's move on to the next one then.
So section 11, this was something that is on page 11.4, if you're looking in all that red line text, like right in the middle of the page under section 11.05, there was a reference that was previously in here that referred to some previous resolutions that were passed by the Board of Trustees and the need for preparation of a registered engineer or surveyor in certain cases when filing for a zoning permit application. These were taken out when we kind of redid the section of the resolution, and the Planning Commission is recommending that we put back in these trustee resolutions because they still are in effect. They may be antiquated, but they haven't been rescinded by the trustees. So I do agree that yes, we should include back in these references to these 2 resolutions. I did pull these for my own, I have copies of them if you're interested in looking at them. But the one is basically talking about when there's a new subdivision and you're building on a new single-family lot, that a site plan has to be submitted to the township that shows a grading plan, and then upon the house being constructed, An as-built grading plan has to be presented to the township for their approval, who then lets the county building department know that we received it, and then they can give them their certificate of occupancy. It's not exactly how we do things, but it's still a valid resolution. The other one had to do with requiring a drainage plan to be submitted for any zoning permit that we required for a new house, and that would show the grading of the lot and within 100 feet of the lot. So that's the gist of what those resolutions state. I have copies of them if you want to read them, but I would suggest we just put it back in there because they still are active resolutions. Did anyone want a copy now, or I can give them to you? Okay. Moving on in that section, number 2, this is, the Planning Commission is recommending that we change section 11.04C, step 3, from decision to township action. This is found on page 11.2. It's at the bottom of the page there. You'll see in 11.04C, step 3, we titled it as decision. They're recommending that we change it to township action. I'm fine either way. It can stay or it can change. They're saying that it's because step 3 is the action that the zoning commission takes. Or that it should say zoning inspector, but we wrote zoning commission. So I'm fine, either we can leave it as decision or take the recommendation and change it to township action. Similar comment on the next one under section 11.05 under review criteria. They're suggesting that we change that wording to state conformity to the zoning resolution because the 2 items listed under 11.05 relate to requiring someone to conform to the zoning, that they are not items that could be reviewed and judged. I have the same feeling on that. I mean, we could change it to that as they suggested, or we could leave it. So, there weren't really any other comments on that section. Text amendment, section 13, under conditional uses. They suggest that we add minimum parking standards for outdoor dining. Patios and the outdoor decks are being used year-round. They're increasing the seating capacity of the facility. The standards should be created in order to make sure that all restaurants are judged the same and there is enough parking for the facility. So if you recall, if you look at page 13.27, I know we talked about this several times and we were back and forth on whether or not we should include in a standard or how we would do that. And what we ended up putting in here was that the applicant shall demonstrate that there is adequate parking available for any outside dining area. I do agree that it would be easier and that every applicant will be treated more fairly if there was a standard in there other than leaving it kind of open to this. It might make it a little bit difficult for the BZA too when granting conditional uses if we leave it vague like this. And I know most recently we've had a lot of outdoor dining with the new Burgers to Beer. They have quite a large patio that we don't know what's going to happen with the parking situation. They don't have additional parking for that. Or they have the minimum based on what their restaurant usable floor area is. I feel like that type of outdoor dining area is probably going to generate more parking.
Is there a common standard that could be adapted that everyone uses? Or?
Not really. I mean, we did a lot of research on this before, and some use the same calculation that they used for the inside portion of the restaurant. Some use like a reduced rate from what they required from the inside of the restaurant. So for table service restaurants in Concord, we require 1 parking space per every 75 square feet of usable floor area, plus some additional parking based on the number of employees. I think if we turn to page 29.8 in the parking tally, let's see what that was. Right, so it's 75 square feet of usable floor area plus 1 space for every employee on max shift plus an additional 10 spaces, and that's for the indoor.
What have we done over at Concord Plaza now that they put outside seating, you know, like right in the parking area.
Yeah, I mean, that was all before this was a conditional use. Like
So
stacks
that's like
and
grandfather, that's.
all that's grandfathered in. I know parking over there gets a
Yeah,
little hectic.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Big
don't know
time.
what the overall numbers are for the facility. I'm not sure how much additional increase in parking.
Well, what's the thought process on going with a reduced for the outdoor versus using the same as the indoor?
Well, I think we had that debate, is it a trade-off, like during the summertime months? Are you really gonna get more people there, or are they just gonna sit outside versus inside?
Because I think if you use, so driving by and looking at the parking lot out front of Burger's the Beer now, which is the hot spot in Concord for the time, you know, at least for
Right.
now,
Yeah.
that parking lot's pretty full. And there's not a lot of other business in that plaza yet.
I know.
And I'll use as another example of the Red Hawk during the season. That parking lot can be pretty full on a Friday or Saturday night during the winter time. But I don't think, and now their patio is quite large. It's probably more space outside than it maybe the indoor. I don't know, hard to tell, but that doesn't seem to affect, you know, there's no drop off of like, well, inside versus outside at the Red Hawk. They maintain consistency, and during the season, I mean, go in there on a busy Saturday or Sunday night, I mean, good luck finding a spot. It's pretty bad. So I would suggest that, I don't know why we would go, I don't know, I have a hard time thinking we'd go easier on the place at this point, considering that we seem to have parking problems more than we don't have parking problems. But I agree that some standard's probably not a bad idea, because as I'm reading that, and I'm thinking someone's coming in and talking to us, and see, I'll demonstrate to what? I mean,
Yeah.
so one person's gonna come in and say one thing, and then, you know, a year later, someone else will come something different, and we're satisfied one time and then not another. That is confusing.
Well,
If,
and,
as I say, if I remember correctly, and we did go back and forth discussing this because of this issue, was we didn't want to require the same amount as inside because it was only used,
Right.
you know, 6 months maximum out of the year. But I think that's where we kind of came to that conclusion of saying, well, let's say, put it up to the property owner to show that their provided spaces are enough.
Right.
If they're gonna cover it. I mean, if I remember correctly, it's been probably a year since we started discussing that, but
Right.
my recollection was that I know we didn't want to do the same amount as inside because it was going to, you know, it was only gonna be a certain portion of the year, but there was the discussion of whether it would be, was the internal flow just gonna be external during the summer months?
Right, well, I think the other thing you get into
Doubling
is,
their capacity for that.
I think when Mr. Osborne was in here, we were chatting about the Crowell Crossing property. There was some conversation about how many restaurant, you know, there was the whole conversation about if more of it turned over to dining than he was planning, he didn't have enough spaces to cover based on internal
right.
conversation. And we told him that if he was gonna have that many, he's gonna have to come back and basically create the parking spaces before he could have that.
Yeah.
So that didn't even address, that's the potential of it. The other side of it is a developer comes in, I mean, what do they necessarily know about the seasonal activity of, I mean, they're building a property, building a structure, and a tenant's coming in to use that space.
Yeah.
You know, the tenant's gonna have a better feel for what that fluctuation is, and again, I mean, it could vary. I mean, you could see in Burgers de Beer, you could see a situation where, yeah, maybe people are sitting outside more than not, but, you know, like I said, in the case of the Red Hawk, seasonality just makes their parking demands go up.
And also what affects places like the Red Hawk, they have space there for reunions, wedding receptions, and they have live entertainment.
Right.
So that really draws the people into the outdoor seating.
Yep.
The problem I see with that is that, I mean, take a look at Walmart down in Chardon, okay? Look at Walmart. In the summertime, they have that gigantic parking lot, right? Gigantic. In the summertime, how much of that parking lot's used? A fraction, right? The vast majority of it is open space, correct? Christmas time, from Thanksgiving on, good luck finding a parking space in that gigantic parking lot. But it's seasonal. And in the meantime, you've got all that impervious surface. You've got all that potential for runoff. You've got all that space that's paved over that really doesn't have any value other than a perceived need, which could be seasonal. I'd think it would be a shame to kind of require somebody to create a bunch of parking spaces that they think they need when you really don't know. And here's the rub for them. I mean, if they don't have enough parking, then people are going to go somewhere else, right?
True.
So they go to the, you know, if you were the only restaurant in Concord,
Right.
then I could see the point. But you've got the Red Hawk, you've got Pub Freight, you go right down the row. I mean, if I go to Red Hawk and there's no parking spaces and I'm really burning to go out to dinner or have a drink, I'll just go down the road somewhere else and find a place that does have a place to park, and I'll park there and I'll give my business there. So do you really want to get into, to me, that is an odd
Well,
issue to start dictating.
And I think that,
I-
I think
I
that's
don't
something
think-
you have with them,
I
where you're
don't-
just determining parking.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that in the sense that, I mean, I see what you're saying, and a part of me, I agree with the whole free market. Like, yeah, fine. So businesses is going to flow wherever. That said, you know, the last time we were talking about these amendments at a public hearing, we weren't really debating these amendments as such, but some of us made a point that we are taking the diligence with this text to help manage the development in the township to avoid a lot of objection for further development. We just got through an election where everybody was belly aching about development in Concord and all the collateral problems with that. We're sitting here in front of an issue that, you know, the township's going to be held accountable to it, or people are going to call the zoning office and complain about why this place doesn't have property. You know, whether the tenant or the property or the developer are in that whole fine, we're just maxed out, send you on down the road. We know this is still something people come back to the township with question or
But if
concern
there's-
about. So I think it behooves us to have some level. Now, whether we go, I see what you're saying with Walmart, but, you know, in that case, that's an example, but we already know we have a parking problem with restaurants in this township.
But it still could be reviewed case by case when they come in and apply. They know they're going to have 20 outside tables or whatever it is. They know they're going to have live entertainment or not. They know they're going to have a big gathering area or not. Each case is a little bit different. So we could manage that.
Correct, but when a developer comes in, like Mr. Osborne,
Right.
how in touch is he with the flow of the various tenants when he's putting that property up? Not to mention that we can design and build property, or he can design and build property, we can approve it. 2 years later, a new tenant moves in.
Could be sold,
What is
yep.
this to go? So I go back to what Heather's point is, to not have some measure. Now, whether it needs to be as tight or specific as, but maybe there's some kind of a way we can figure for at least a minimum allowance that says you've got to do this beyond shall demonstrate that it's adequate. Because we don't, we don't have a definition for what adequate is. How do we?
But we do have a means of calculating a restaurant space and the number of potential tables with parking, correct?
For the inside?
Yeah, for inside dining.
For known commodities, but
Right, I
to
mean,
Morgan's
that's based on
point,
a
they,
usable square footage
Right.
inside.
Right.
I would be leaning toward coming up with some figure, because if you look at how, like, Crowd Crossing, they built the bare minimum parking spots because they wanted to maximize their building footprints. The Discount Drug Mart site, they built 100 spaces over their minimum required. So it depends on who the developer is and what their use of the property is. If Lance knew up front that he needed additional parking for the outdoor dining, he would have made it work. He wasn't going to build, extra spots because he wanted an extra building. He wanted to be able to fit in the Chipotle and the Starbucks and the two, 11, 12,000 square foot retail centers. Plus, I think with the changes that we're making in section 29, that if a developer comes forward with a parking demand study and proves otherwise, that that the project would still meet its demand, that they could do a lesser number of spaces, I think is a way.
I like that.
It's kind of a way-
We need to be, I think, be specific about how they demonstrate that. I mean, if you wanted to sit there and say they have to do a study and that's the subject, that's what we cite, be case by case, we put it up against what they bring us as far as data. But I think putting something in place.
Thank you.
I think putting something in place more than what we have is advisable. Considering how contentious these little issues become down the road. Heather, do you have thoughts about how to derive that standard? I mean, you seem to.
I mean, for the inside, it's the 75, one space for every square foot of usable square footage. So usable versus gross, you basically exclude out like hallways and bathrooms and closets and things like that. Plus 10 extra spaces, which, I don't know, it's just a bonus extra spaces, and then plus the number of spaces per employee on max shift. So, I mean, you could stick with, one extra space for every 75 square feet. If you want to, I mean, it would all be usable technically, but I don't think it would add that much, because if you recall too, the size of the outdoor dining area is somewhat limited based on the current code to only 25% of the inside capacity.
Right. Well, I think the other thing, we're assuming that the inside capacity will remain at capacity and the outside capacity will be overflow. And I've been, I mean, just from dining experiences with a number of the local places in the summertime when the patio is full, usually the restaurant is empty and the bar is empty inside. Everything is out, everybody's outside. So does it, I mean, I don't know. To me, less impervious space and less stormwater issues and things like that to me are more important than some additional potential parking spaces. That's the way I look at it.
Well, I think that to that point, though, those are determined based off of the size of the restaurant and the size of the outdoor space. If you have minimal outdoor space, the first group of people in are going to get the outdoor space. The rest of them are going to stay inside.
Right.
So you still have that internal. So if you're limiting the total outdoor seating to a comparison of what's in percentage of
I
the
think-
internal, I kind of feel that it would be probably best to just say maybe along the lines of keeping it as the one space per 75 square feet of outdoor usable space, and eliminating, don't include employees the extra employees you're hiring for that outdoor space, your extra bartender.
I think there
extra
needs to be
waiters,
some kind of
waitresses.
consideration. It's not necessarily a one-to-one on the standard for the inside, but I think you need to account for some increase. I'm with Andy. I don't want an overrun of impervious surface for no reason, but by the same token, I don't want to sit here and have 20 parking spaces too few in a place and have people have that problem as well. I think we need to be realistic about it, and I think it's tenant dependent too. You may find a place that gets popular and people like so much, like, I can sit outside, they'll take it, but if not, no, I'll sit inside, and you could end up with a place that's busy.
But if
Both-
you wind up with a situation or a restaurant like the Red Hawk, where their outdoor space can seat or accommodate a lot more people than their indoor space can, now you've got that, you kind of got that issue of your seasonal is much higher than your regular.
And Andy,
So I think if you had that, keep that same percent or that same ratio, or maybe drop it down, increase it to 100, to 1 per 100 square feet of usable, give it a little bit extra,
Buffer,
but then have that ability for a parking study be done by a professional, showing that, hey, we don't need that. We're expecting majority of our summer customers to be the indoor customers who are now sitting outdoor.
I was just going to add on to the additional impervious surface that it could create. That is true. It could create additional impervious surface. However, just keep in mind that the maximum lot coverage is still 70% for any new development within most of the commercial districts. So some try to maximize that 70%, some are way under depending on how they're developing the lot. So I think it would, in the scope of things, It would be a very minor increase in their lot coverage for the amount of additional parking that may be required.
So you're saying add another spot per 75 square feet? An additional spot for every 75?
I mean, that's what I was suggesting. It sounded like you,
Jerry was
some of the
thinking more
members
of
were thinking.
100, so that would sort of, it would incrementally add, but not at quite the same rate.
not at the same rate per se.
Yeah. I think something along those lines is not a bad way to go. That way we're accounting for a slight increase, should there be some, but maybe not going overboard in making it a 1-for-1.
Either that or use a percentage. If you have an outdoor seating, you have to have 10% more parking than normally would, or something like that. 10 or 15, or whatever the right number
Right.
is.
That's tricky.
Because, you know, it'd be difficult on an outdoor patio. They can put more tables or less tables, and the square footage is gonna be the same.
Well, and I still think, I mean, we're looking at this in a situation of just saying, hey, it's a restaurant, it's got outdoor seating. I still go back to the thing is I think that the tenant that's going to have that combination is really going to drive a lot of that, which makes it more complicated. It's not cut and dry of, oh, it's going to be people just sitting outside and they're trading indoor for outdoors. I think it's so variable, and I think that's where we can potentially get in trouble, is that it's hard to come up with one thing and just say, well, that's going to fix it.
Yeah, right.
Well, we could maybe get around it by not requiring it to be paved. It could be gravel. Well, I mean, if it's not being used, you know, Andy's made a good point.
Were you talking about the parking?
The parking.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, space would be-
Overflow.
Overflow could be gravel. This way here, it's not being paved over with a lot of runoff and that.
Well, we did
It's
do other
used.
things as far as stormwater management, that's not, you know, as far
Yeah.
as encourage shared parking, I would assume a shared parking scenario would roll into your computation as well, so that's a way they could get it, that would be case by case sensitive, so it would take into effect if someone comes up with a scenario like that. I think we're talking about the kind of development we're talking about in the corridor area. I think we'd be wise to address this in some way with some level of standard, because if we don't, we're leaving it to the developers completely.
Do we know what people like, what does Menor do? They have a lot more restaurants than we have. Do they have a standard for outdoor seating parking? Do we know that?
I haven't looked at Mentor's code. to
I
see.
mean, we might be able to benchmark another community and come up with something that's fairly effective.
I think that's maybe, that's what I was gonna get back to when Rich threw up 10-15% and going, well, you know, should we take a look at what those numbers might be? What would 10% be of some comparable type situations with what we have, to see how many spaces is that adding? Because what I wouldn't wanna do is go to, I don't think there's any way to say it's gonna make Menor sound good. I wanted Andy's situation with Walmart and talking about that, and you go to Menor standard, I mean, they have a lot of big open parking lots, so I'm a little hesitant to take a look at that zoning text, because it probably just, I mean, everywhere you go in Menor, you see a parking lot.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
but they
we
have a
have
lot
different challenges in the township with the way our, you know, with our space and our goal to preserve more of the green space.
I wouldn't go with like the Great Lakes Mall restaurants, but there are a lot of independent restaurants in Menor that are scattered throughout the city
Yeah.
that we could look at that would be similar to what we might have.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, like the Burgers to Beer patio, if I recall, it's correctly, it's like 15, the dimensions are around, it's like around 1,200 square feet, gross square feet, their patio, 1,200 square feet. So just say you were going to do the one for every 100, like that would have been 12 additional parking spaces, which in my opinion, they need them.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because like I was over there at a lunchtime the
Yeah.
other day, and like you said, like the parking lot is full, and like the patio's not even open.
And
Yeah.
there's what? Only a couple of tenant spaces?
Yeah,
That whole other building's not even open yet.
yeah.
plus Chipotle.
And that's
Right,
a-
right,
And
exactly.
if you remember, they got variances from the Board of Zoning Appeals to increase the size of their patio. So they were at like 67% of their inside seating capacity. So they granted variance to make it almost 3 times the size that it should have been, with no additional parking required.
Just your rough count, I mean, I'm kind of liking Jerry's idea of 100 as opposed to 75 on the outdoor. That seems like a appropriate add. I mean, I haven't really looked at it, remembered the size of the patio, but that makes me feel a little more comfortable. Another dozen spots doesn't
Yeah.
seem out of control, and it seems like we're doing some diligence about accounting for that.
You're basically talking about another single loaded row of parking.
And I guess if they felt it wasn't needed, they could make a case for it.
Right.
Rather us have it, that they have to meet a requirement and argue against meeting it versus not providing it and then us kind of getting bit, not having it.
I agree with Morgan, and I just think that more and more, we're gonna see more people looking for outdoor dining because it is more of an experience, and if we see people are asking for variances all the time after we have it, if we have it in place, then, at that point, it could be readdressed, but I don't think that anyone's gonna be too overexcited or put out by the additional parking that's required for the additional dining area. You guys want to think about that more? We can keep moving on and, okay, all right. All right. So, section 15, residential districts, planning commission recommended approval as submitted. Same thing with section 16 and section 22. In section 29 are off-street parking standards. I had a couple comments here. The first one was they recommended changing the number of hours to store a vehicle to 72 hours from 48 hours. A daycare center may store a vehicle used for the facility over a weekend. This would exceed the 48 hours. So if you turn to page 29.3, in section 29.03, letter B, here we have storage, that all parking areas for non-residential uses shall not be used for the continuous storage of a vehicle for more than 48 hours, except as otherwise permitted in this resolution. So that last section, if you actually go back to section 13.9 where we regulate daycare centers, we do have a statement in there, actually on page 13.9. So 13.9. My numbers messed up here. 13.9. Under section 1308, where we have the conditional use requirements for child or adult daycare centers. Paragraph E, we do state that vehicles used to transport clients on field trips or similar activities shall be permitted to park overnight at the center in compliance with the parking setbacks. So I think the fact that we have that line item in there, there is no reason to change that from the 48 hours to 72, because we're specifically allowing those vehicles to park overnight at those locations. So I wouldn't recommend making that change. The next bullet point, reduce the parking lot aisles for parallel spaces from 25 feet. So this was a standard that was previously in here that we didn't really look at, but I do agree that we should modify this. If you go to page 29.14, section C, this is where we dictate parking lot aisle widths, and depending on the degree of the parking, there's a different aisle width for one-way parking aisles, and they're specifically calling out for the parallel parking where there's a one-way aisle, that the 25 feet is rather large for one-way parking, which I do agree. And they did provide us some examples of some other communities that we could consider. Examples of one-way parking aisle width for parallel parking spaces. In Dublin, Ohio, they have 13 feet. In Delaware, Ohio, they have 12 feet. In Westerville, Ohio, 12 feet. Painesville Township has 14 feet. And Madison Township has 15 feet. So I agree, it should be reduced from 25 feet. As far as what number is the magic number, I'm not really sure. If you want to go on the conservative side, you could go down to 12 feet. If you want to be more generous, go up to the 15 feet or somewhere in between, but we probably should make a change on that, and that would help reduce impervious surface as well. There's probably not a lot of parking lots where we'll get the parallel parking, but in the case that we do, we want to have the right aisle width. We don't want something so large.
I think 14's a happy medium on that.
Yeah. The cities tend to be narrower, and the townships
Right.
tend to be wider.
Yeah. I noticed
14
that.
or 15 even.
I think 14's a good number.
Yeah, I agree. 14.
Okay.
Change it to 14, Heather?
If that's what you guys want to decide on.
Yeah.
And then, kind of following the same section, down to 29.07 on the next page, paragraph B, the shared driveway section. They suggested that we move that to its own section because it warrants their own section. And I think it's fine where it is, because we're talking about access drive regulations and that we're encouraging the shared drives rather than individual drives. So I don't think we need to move that. I had a few more comments on the next page here. In our table of uses that shows the minimum number of parking spaces, if you turn to page 29.8, where we list restaurant counter service and restaurant table service, our code has dashes in there, and in our other sections of the resolution, they have commas separating them, so it should really read restaurant, comma, counter service, and restaurant, comma, table service. And I agree, we should change that so it matches the other sections. And then on page 29.19, kind of all over the place here. Paragraph A, let's see, paragraph A3, they're suggesting that it should read, parking areas are measured outside of the right-of-way. They state that the township zoning should not be trying to regulate parking inside of the right-of-way. There is 11 feet from the edge of the pavement in the right-of-way line in most platted subdivisions. It is not possible to stop people from parking their cars on that pavement, and the term prohibited implies that you're going to do that. This regulation should state how you are going to measure the parking area for a use. For example, the 500 square feet of unenclosed parking area for single-family homes should be measured outside of the right-of-way. I get what they're saying here, and I do agree we could make a change. If we were going to make a change to A3 there, I would suggest that it read, parking areas as required in table 29.04A are measured outside of the road right-of-way. So, for example, in an R1 zoning district for a single-family dwelling, we require a minimum of 500 square feet of unenclosed parking area, which is basically your driveway. And if by adding this, it would specify that it would not include the portion of your driveway that's in the road right-of-way. But I don't agree that the intent was not to regulate on-street parking by putting that in, I think. But I guess it was perceived that way, so. Any questions on that, or? Okay. All right, the next bullet point, delete 29.10A5. We're looking in the same section. And because 29.10A5 and 29.10A7 state the same thing.
Grass.
Yeah, they kind of are the same thing, yes. So we could strike number 5. that's fine, because we have it, and then renumber, or we could just get rid of number 7. But I agree, we do need to eliminate one of those. So if we strike number 5, then their next comment would be on number 7, to change the word grass to non-improved areas. And my opinion on that is I think we could just leave it as grass. It's not necessary to change that to a non-improved area. Then we'd have to come up with some definition too of what a non-improved area is.
Right.
The next one, this is in reference to a section on page 2910. They're indicating that we should change Ohio Basic Building Code to all applicable state and federal laws. And this is on section 29.04D. So this has to do with accessible parking space requirements. Yes, and we should make that change. I agree with that. And the last comment, they indicate that we should insert standards for surfacing or create a subcommittee to review for best practices on state and federal laws. This is to make sure that pavers, bricks, and other materials do not create issues per other state or federal laws. For example, that they meet the ADA requirements. I don't think that this board can create a committee, obviously, to do this, but I think we're fine with what we have in the zoning, because all projects have to be ADA compliant and meet all federal guidelines. So it's not necessary for us to state that again in the zoning resolution. As long as we're not putting something in here that says you don't have to be compliant, then we're fine. So. That was it for that section. They had a few comments in section 36 under the site plan review. Add regulations that a site plan is required for multifamily in the R2 PUD. You require site plans for apartments and condominium complexes in R3, but you do not require a site plan for those uses in the R2. So the R2 PUD is basically like the Quail Hollow. That's the only one we have right now. Well, Summerwood is the PUD too. But with Summerwood, they didn't do any multifamily. They did all single-family homes on fee simple lots. So there's a couple phases of Quail Hollow where they built condominium-type ownership developments. It looks like single-family houses, but it's on a large tract of land, so it's not really a subdivision. And they're suggesting that we require them to go through the same site plan review process that we do for like the R3 for the R3 developments. We currently don't have that in here. We could add that in. That's not a problem. We'd probably have to go back and look in section 16 and see if there's anything else that we would have to change that would need to reflect that. As far as what the process is, I haven't had a chance to do that. Or we could just leave it as it is and then look at that later on. I just haven't had the opportunity to see, like, if we were to add that in section 36, what other changes might be necessary in section 16.
Has it been an issue up to this point?
There's kind of one pending right now that would have been nice maybe to take it through the site plan review process, yes. But it's not like it's going to be retroactive, you know, that they're already in motion. So, and what's left with that particular development, I'm not sure that there'll be another opportunity. That there could be for more multifamily. So yes, it might be helpful. We have it in there. Just kind of think. if we could easily add it in here. If I go back and look at section 16.
How long do you think it'll take you to go through it and just verify everything?
I'm sorry, what's that?
How long do you think it'll take you to go through it to verify everything?
How long would it take you to go through it? I mean, if you want it, I could probably come back at the next meeting and have additional insight on that if you wanted me to, or since we are meeting in a couple weeks.
Well, it depends on you and your workload.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you feel? If you don't think it's going to be an issue, because there's only one thing hanging in there now,
I know a couple of the areas she talked about in Quail I don't think they look bad the way they are,
okay.
you know,
Yeah.
so.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Stephanie, to add, or do you have any strong feelings either way, or?
I don't have strong feelings one way or another. I mean, you could always approve it as it is right now and go back and revisit it if it becomes an issue in the future.
We haven't heard anybody from Quail Hollow complaining about anything, have we?
Not as far as how the development is happening there, no.
Right. It seems to be fine from what I can recall.
Right, I mean, there's been some concerns about water issues, drainage, from previous phases, but zoning wouldn't address that. You know,
Right.
we know that's all the county engineer and
Right.
stormwater management department, so
Right.
that's one of those are the only things I've heard. So,
But there's been water drainage problems for many years in
Yeah.
various areas.
sure, yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
okay.
All right, the next bullet point was to require emails to be submitted in section 36.04 D2. And this can be found on page 36.4. And this is the list of items that need to be shown on the site plan. And actually, our site plan review application has a field for applicants to put their email address, so I don't think it's necessary that we add this in to the zoning text. The next point, change the name of parking and loading plan to traffic circulation plan, including parking and loading spaces, locations, etc., in section 36.04 D5. The term traffic circulation plan better describes the plan requested than the term parking and loading plan does. This is also on the same page, number 5, and I think it's fine how it is. I don't really think it's necessary to change that. Because we do talk about within here, this paragraph showing the traffic circulation as well.
Right.
The next bullet point, require land use and zoning information of adjacent property on the site plan. It is important information for the zoning commission to know. It may remind them to require a buffer or not require a buffer or enforce other parts of the zoning resolution. And I agree, we should keep this in. We originally were going to strike this out. It's number 3 on here, so I would say yes, we should put that back in. The next one, require contour information on the site and adjacent properties. Contour information is necessary to know how water is going to move on the site, how deep utilities need to be, etc. This item is a standard on most site plans, and it may have been accidentally deleted because of the mass movement of items in the to the landscape section. But if you look on page 36.5, number 19, we do require existing and proposed topographic contours at 1 foot intervals within 100 feet of the proposed site. So I think we're covered.
Yeah,
They may have overlooked that.
right.
And the last bullet point under this section, add proposed and existing to the section requiring easements to be shown on the plan. And this is on that same page, 36.5, it's number 14. And yet again, I think this is one they maybe just didn't see, but we do have widths, location, uses, and grantees of all existing and proposed easements
Right.
must be shown on the plan. So that's already in there, so we don't need to make that change. All right. Last section that they had some comments on, the landscape plan. Define what an other landscape design professional is. Is it an owner of a landscaping company, a nursery professional, the Ohio State education educator, et cetera? So this is on page 38.2, paragraph D. And this was previous verbiage that was in here already, we just kind of moved it, but I do agree it is a little vague. We could just strike that portion that says, or other landscape design professional. I did talk to a landscape architect about this who is on the planning commission, and he had suggested that we could even just change this whole paragraph D to state that a landscape plan shall be prepared by an Ohio registered landscape architect, and leave it at that. Or if you wanted to come up with some definition of what that other landscape design professional is, you could try to come up with some definition based on maybe how many years of experience they may have had. But I think my recommendation would be is to strike that last section and even just to revise it to state that it shall be prepared by an Ohio registered landscape architect. That would tighten that up.
So that's in D,
Yes. Yeah.
that's the 38.
So you want to rewrite D is what you're saying?
Yeah, D should state that the landscape plan shall be prepared by an Ohio registered landscape architect, and then put a period and just strike the other design professional.
So, or other from that point is going to be stricken.
Yes.
Okay.
And everything that we've ever had submitted from a site plan has always been by a registered landscape design architect. I haven't seen anything submitted
Right.
by some other professional, so I'm not really sure who that would be. All right, the last comment, review section 38.03G for vagueness, and section 38.05G. Are you waiving the height requirements or plant material altogether? Define. So 38.03G, this has been in here, I guess, since maybe, it was originally adopted in 1974 and then amended in 2006. It is somewhat vague. It talks about during construction that every effort should be made to preserve existing healthy trees and shrubs, and that in some cases, the township could require a review by a certified arborist or some other expert to determine whether or not trees should be saved or not. I don't know if the commission wants to look at that to make it more strong, if it's something that you want to make it more of a requirement when they come in to show on plans, like mark the size of trees and things like that, or if you're fine with the way it is.
Has it created any, have you come across any issues in enforcing the code where you've had to, they're not doing this? Something we really look at?
No, it isn't really anything that we've looked at that closely.
Because I've seen a lot of houses going in Summerwood and.
Well, these
either
wouldn't apply to Summerwood.
Okay,
This is
but-
all for commercial.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. But I'm just saying, I mean, it seems like they come in and they, clearing trees, building houses, and,
Right.
is anyone really paying attention to that? So if
Right.
you're gonna do that, you probably need to put a lot more, he's right, that's vague, but.
But for
Thanks.
commercial, this is for commercial, and since we're aware of it, we have
Right.
the ability to sort of firm it up as necessary.
Right. Well, I'm agreeing, I mean, you probably do need to I mean, I'm reading it as,
Well, if we require it for conservation development, why shouldn't we do it for them too? Why should we give them the opportunity to go in clear cut when it wouldn't necessarily be necessary? I would like to see,
I'm sorry, them, you mean commercial?
right,
Oh.
why shouldn't we have them required to do the same thing? Like with conservation development, we require them to look for, areas of trees and all that good
Right.
stuff,
But with that, they get the density bonus
But the
by protecting that
Conservation
additional.
development's a little different thing.
Yeah,
You're covering most of this other stuff by your other zoning areas, size of lots, parking, minimum or maximum paved areas and such. That's where you're covering that open space and that. Whereas with the conservation development, they're asking to take the 1 acre lots down to eighth of an acre or something along those lines. So it is a little different in those situations.
It's a little different, but then when we require them to put in landscaping and stuff, per se, rather than doing clear cutting and then coming in and putting in landscaping afterwards, if you can save what's there and still, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
preserve
but
that.
realistically, you're gonna build a building on a commercial development. You can't have trees where the building sits.
Well, that's true.
And so
But-
you make every effort. I really don't have a problem with the way it's worded, as long as we're aware of it and we can, during the site plan review, stress the importance of protecting whatever's possible.
Right.
And then what's not possible, making up for it with new landscaping. That'd be my thought.
I mean, the only thing I could see is if you start getting into that, now you are getting into where you're building, you should be putting the building over here instead of here in order to save
Save
that
a
one
oak tree.
tree or as opposed to, the zoning, which is more generalized, here's the zoning, now you go and lay it out based off of that zoning. Rather than trying to get into the zoning defining where you can put your building because of a tree or.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it to be that restrictive,
And I think
Well,
that's where you're trying to
well,
get with
see-
this, of just having it more generalized, to say every effort should be made to look into that.
Well, that's what I meant, to look into.
the second comment on that bullet point was referring to another section, 38.05G. Or, I'm sorry, it's on page 38.4, same page. G, and this was a new comment that we added in. They asked, are you waiving the height requirements or plant material altogether? So this was in reference to the interior parking lot landscaping, where if a developer was going to do the bioretention within that area, that we were waiving the plant material requirement, because otherwise they have to do the one tree and all the low shrubs, but usually with bioretention, there's very specific plant materials that has to be planted. So yes, we are waiving the normal plant material requirement. I thought it was clear the way we wrote it, but I don't know, we can read it again and make sure, but
I think we're good the way we are. I think it's pretty clear.
okay. Okay, and then, as it referred to sections 34 and 37, they recommended approval as submitted. I didn't have any other suggested modifications either, so that was it.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, at this point, I would like to open up to the floor to any residents that would like to have any input on any of the amendments that are before us. Is anyone opposed or in favor of any of the amendments that are presented in the agenda and also in the written material.
Have you scanned the, so that people out there can see there's nobody here except us plus an alternate?
These crowds overwhelm me.
Since we don't have anybody in attendance of tonight's meeting, I'm assuming that there's not a lot of strong feelings one way or the other about what we're reviewing here. I don't see any reason to keep the public hearing open at this point.
Mr. Chairman, there was a lot of discussion, there's a lot of amendments on it before you tonight. I would suggest to the board, if there's any amendment that anybody's uncomfortable with or they want to have further discussion on, that you would recess the public hearing as opposed to close it. Once you close it, there can't be further discussion, just to vote. I'm sorry, there can't be further discussion with the audience, it would only be amongst yourselves prior to the vote. So that would be my only suggestion to you. If you're comfortable with the amendments and the recommendations from Heather, then you could close the public hearing and proceed with the vote or table your vote.
Anybody have any issues with any of the amendments in front of us that needed to be changed? I think our zoning department pretty much covered everything, highlighted what they felt was pertinent to adding versus any further discussion on the parking.
Well, that's the only one
Yeah.
I saw that we were unclear about what we wanted to do there. It's the only
As
one.
far as the outdoor parking, right?
Yeah, how we want to measure that, if we want to measure it.
Which was, that one was what?
That was the section 13, conditional use.
That would be amendment number 3. That was zoning amendment number 3.
Yeah, right, that would be it.
13.
13.
13, I'm sorry. Yeah. number-
Section-
The amendment number 3, but section 13.
Section 13, amendment 3, right.
I get, in consideration of the things that Heather brought up, the Lake County Planning Commission, their comments, they don't really give us any guidance there. They just say that we need to create some parity between them so that there's enough parking. They don't really give us any ideas or any comments as to the numbers. I like Jerry's idea with the, per 100 square feet, an additional parking space. I think that's a good, I don't think we want to overcomplicate this, I don't think it's, we get into percentages and then odd numbers and, if 100, it's easy enough with the 100 square foot calculation to, to come up with the number of additional parking spaces they would need. And I think that's easy enough to add into the zoning text without, really getting too far off in the weeds on this. I'm okay with that. I think 100. I think an additional space per 100, square feet would be a good number to use. I think that's a good number.
Gives us something.
Yeah, like you said, if they got 1,200 square feet of outdoor dining spaces, an additional 12 spaces. It's pretty simple to calculate. It doesn't, we don't have to have a math wizard to figure it out. I think that's pretty good. They don't have to hire a parking lot specialist to calculate.
Unless they want to try to get out of it.
Right.
Putting that in perspective, though, what would we estimate the Red Hawks patio size is? It's got to be 3,000 square feet, right? At least,
Probably.
I would guess. That would mean 30 more parking spots over there. It's quite a bit.
Yeah, but I think that's an exception to the rule.
Well,
We look at what, when we look at what's already developed, there's, the horses are out of the barn on those, I think, at this point. It would be pretty difficult to go back in and mandate additional parking for,
I'm just
And
thinking,
that's assuming that their existing parking is based off of
True.
What
Sure,
their
the
internal
current standard,
space is.
right.
And to that, to your point though, Rich.
Well, and
I
that's
mean,
probably, they're upside down.
Right.
They're backwards. They're probably compliant to their indoor, and then they've got this massive patio that's exceeded, that puts them over
Bigger than the
budget.
But to
inside.
your
Yeah.
point though, if somebody new came in
Right.
and wanted to build a new facility and was gonna put in a 3,000 square foot,
Then we'd ask for the 30
you know,
spots.
It would
we
raise-
ask for
it
those
would-
additional 30
Yeah,
spaces.
and it would raise the
Raise
point.
question of,
Yeah,
Yeah.
raise the, yeah, exactly. I think,
Yeah, if your external space is bigger than your internal space, then it raises the question of which one should we be using?
Right. Well, and in Red Hawk's case, I mean, I don't know if we can go to it soon, but it's at least on parity, at least it's equal inside, because they've got the two dining room, or they got the bar and the dining
Well,
room.
and
It's-
two
Yeah, I'm
paninis,
not
what is
saying
their
it is,
square
it's
footage
just-
back there? That's pretty large.
Yeah. And they had parking problems when
Yeah,
they
they
first
did.
opened up, and there was the whole bit with the
Yeah.
grocery store saying we don't, you know, the signs they had to put up because of the problems they had with parking. That was a real problem when it first opened.
I recall.
Yeah. I like the 100. I think it, you know, raises the point, because if somebody comes in and that's, as you said, Rich, if it's high, at least that's a discussion when there are plans before us. And they need
I think
to,
that's a good number. I think the 100 square feet, and I think it's easy to calculate. And if they feel otherwise, then I think they can make their case during that.
True.
It's an even number, we're accounting for the fact that it's not year-round, so it's not the same amount as
True.
we're internal.
Yeah.
We're not adding for the additional staff they may have for that too, so I
yeah.
think it's a good number to start with.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, if you're going to restrict it to patios that are only open year-round, you might want to also include that in the text. That for every patio that's open year-round, for every 100 square feet, an additional parking space is required as opposed to just seasonal. If you want it to apply to all patios across the board, then that's fine. But if it's only to patios
For
used
seasonal.
year-round, then you want to clarify that.
So are we talking about the 100 per for seasonal patios, or because, do we have any year-round patios in Concord?
But they talked about not a patio, but an outdoor eating area between the two buildings over here on the new Crow Crossing, which case there could be seats out, you theoretically could heat them with mushroom
Yeah.
heaters.
Well, I believe Heather, you could probably speak more to this. The Burgers Severe
Yeah.
patio is fully enclosed and heated,
Yeah,
so it's considered an outdoor patio, but
a portion of it's fully enclosed and heated.
Yeah.
I would say that
Are they using it now? I mean,
they
Good exa-
weren't.
Where?
the Burgers to Beer.
Burgers de Beer, they
Oh,
have heat
Burgers
in
de Beer.
there and everything. And I know that Red Hawk is installing heaters on their outdoor patio, and
Yeah,
most likely the next thing for them is they're gonna try and close portion of that.
yeah.
But, yeah, my opinion would be to not limit it to patios operated year-round, because no one's gonna come forward and say that they operate their patio year-round. I think if you're gonna add a parking, just add the dining. My recommendation would be in section 13.33, would be to not add in what we are gonna state about the applicant shall demonstrate that there is adequate parking available for any outside dining area. I would say we don't even include that in. And then if you guys were going to dictate the 100 square feet, you should state that one additional parking space shall be provided for every 100 square foot of outdoor dining.
Okay, but yeah, so it's outdoor dining, so how do we, okay, so further to the point, how are we defining outdoor dining? I mean, are we, because if it's one of these patios that's got the garage doors and they've got the heaters out
It doesn't
there.
have a dedicated wall.
Is
fixed
that-
on. The roll-up doors are still considered outdoor dining.
So that's
It's
outdoor
not-
dining, but that could be for season then.
Right.
So but doesn't that effectively then become indoor? Because if you could go to a place right now when it's 7 degrees outside and sit out there, then why would we not consider that at the 75?
Your zoning code currently defines the seating area of a restaurant, correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, by walls, not roll-up doors, not patio awnings. It's by dedicated walls that are attached to the ground.
I was wondering that, we were talking about this before, because those garage doors and rolled up walls are becoming more and more. And if you talk about some of the proposals we had for what could potentially be developed in the township, the likelihood is you're gonna see far more of that. So There's places in downtown Willoughby that are in those older buildings, but there's places that have
Half walls.
their, yeah.
They're half walls, whether
So,
it's.
so that would at one point was physically a wall that would be defined as indoor dining. Now does it qualify as outdoor dining because it has a movable wall?
It could be. I don't have that text in front of me, but it could be, as long as there's a dedicated wall attached to the ground structure.
Because we're using 75 based on a seasonal, with that conversation was based on seasonal fluctuation, but if we're looking at something that's not gonna fluctuate per season, then maybe it's just flat out dining space. Because if they can use it 4 seasons, then does it, by adapting it per seasonality, then wouldn't it just count as straight dining space? Then subject to the lower standard.
Well, I think even with the Burgers to Beer, they're not truly gonna use it all year round. mean,
I haven't
Like right
seen-
now,
they're not
they're
using
not using it. But, you know, fall, when it's cold out and
Extend
people,
the
Right.
season.
yeah, I mean, they'll do the extent, like you said.
Well,
They'll use it 3
and I think
seasons.
that's fine. My question becomes, what if somebody effectively makes it a 4-season situation and it's really year-round dining, and yet we've let them get by with a lower rate of parking? Are we putting ourselves in a problem, or are we okay? I mean, maybe it's fine, just go with this 100 feet and call it a day, but what do you guys think?
It's an extreme situation, it's hard to tell, but I think we're okay.
Okay.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that we can always revisit this.
True.
You know, we always have the ability to come back and make changes. I mean, this is not something we're doing, you know, that's going to be, you know, a final decision that's never going to be changed, you know. So if we, I think we give it our best shot, which I think we've come up with some pretty good ideas here, and we see how it plays out. And if it looks like it's inadequate, then we revisit it and we make a change. You know, we make an amendment, we change the text. But I think at this point, we're at least addressing the
Yeah,
issue, you
right.
know? And I think that, you know, I think it's a good middle ground. I think it's reasonable. I don't think there's anything that's too difficult about it. And if we find out at a later point that it's not addressing the issue, then we, you know, like I said, if they start seeing all sorts of variance requests and all sorts of other stuff, then we know that we need to make some adjustments. So,
Mr. Chairman, can we take a voice vote on the 100 to agree or disagree? So we can move on.
well, I think we have a pretty good consensus on that, right?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Carl?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
Fine.
Yeah, I think you just call it patio.
Yeah, and then as
regardless of
far as,
whether
you
it's
know,
year-round
Just
or
call it outdoor
seasonal.
Yeah, just
Outdoor
call it
dining.
outdoor dining, and forget the seasonal component.
Right.
We'll just call it outdoor dining.
For
period.
now,
And whether it's
yep.
used all year round or whether it's used only certain times of the year, it's, you know, it's included into that definition. And we'll use the 100-foot, we'll use the 100 square foot calculation. Got that, Heather? Okay, so is there any other sticking points or any other issues?
I have one, Andy.
Yes, yes.
On the top of page 2 of the Lake County Planning and Community Development recommendations, there's 3 bullets at the top. We said we're okay with making the change, number 1, and I think on the
Right.
second and third bullet, we said we could go either way.
No, we didn't.
I think that was the words.
Yeah.
So which way are we going?
I think we ought to just leave it the way it was. I think we're,
So then strike those 2 out.
yeah.
Okay. I just want to clarify that. Okay.
I guess on that too, just to be clear, so with the reference to the original trustees' resolutions, if you go back to what's it, section 9, find it, or section, I'm sorry, section 11, sorry. The eyes and the one with you.
Right.
Are we just planning on leaving in just that reference portion under the original 11.05? Where it says the last line there in brackets is Seekonk Township Board of Trustees resolutions, and references those 2 resolutions. how are we putting that back into this?
That would be my recommendation, that it not be amended.
Right, so to put
So you're
that.
leaving the whole section?
No,
or just
the
that?
reference to that should act, and I didn't state this previously, but on our new section 11.04A, number 2, I think it would be appropriate to add it at the end of that paragraph, because that's where it was stated previously.
Yeah, we'll just have the
before we-
reference.
We'll put the whole thing back in there,
Right.
just from the parentheses,
Okay.
Concord
Yep.
Township.
Okay. Any other sticking points or issues that would cause us to delay closing the public hearing this evening? We've got it all figured out.
Looks like it.
And like I said, I think it's important to, I mean, okay, we've always got the opportunity to go back and make some changes if we find we've missed something or we have a real issue that becomes a major sticking point. We can always go back and make the change accordingly, so. It's a lot of work, it's been a lot of time and a lot of effort put into this, and, I think we're pretty much good to go here. Any other comments? All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing. Now, we will go each amendment, and then per any, and then we also need to include any recommendations that we're going to incorporate. So I'll accept we'll go amendment by amendment. We'll do a roll call vote per amendment, Heather. And then what we'll do is I'll take a motion in the affirmative to accept the amendment, and then with any provisions that have been made. And then once we're good with that, then I'll take a second, and then we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, and we'll go right down the list, okay? So, with that said, on amendment number 1, I would like a motion in the affirmative.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept Amendment 1, Section 5, the definitions with, make sure I get all these, with the, accepting the recommendations of the Lake County Planning Commission and staff. Do we want to go through each one of these specifically, which ones?
It's kind of
Okay.
hard to trace them back and forth.
The first one I think we were accepting is the change all references in the cul-de-sac to include the hyphens. And then
Revised parking area.
revised parking area to state any improved ground service area. Revisions to parking regulations allow for, okay, so make those service changes. The next one's in street, private delete or accepted by Concord Township Board of Trustees and/or is not maintained by the township. Township trustees do not accept roads per the ORC and other government entities. There's no clothing for,
Right. That's
okay,
it.
so that's the one.
Yep.
And that's it for that amendment.
Can I get a
And
second?
I will second that motion.
Do we have a second? Heather, can you call the roll?
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
Yes,
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Lingenfelter?
Yes. Okay, we have all yeses, that motion carried unanimously. On to amendment number 2.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the amendment number 2 to section 11 with staff and recommendations from the Lake County Planning Commission. The recommendation from the Planning Commission to add reference to trustees resolution 1972-21 and 1976-11, or require, just to introduce that back into the text.
Right. Okay, I have a motion made, I have a second.
I will second that motion.
Motion been seconded. Heather, can I have the call, roll?
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
yes,
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Yes.
and Mr. Lingenfelter.
Yes.
Passed.
Okay, amendment number 3. There were no, were there any, there was,
That's the
that's the one with the, yeah, with the 100 square foot.
Right.
So I'll entertain a motion in the affirmative with that addition that we made on the additional parking spaces.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept Amendment 3, Section 13, with the discussed revision to add a requirement of 1 space per 100 square feet of outdoor dining to that section.
Okay? Can I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Heather, can you give me the roll, please?
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. Schindler,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Yes.
and Mr. Lingenfelter.
Yes. Okay.
Passed.
Amendment number 4, which is section 15. There was no comments for any additions by the Lake County Planning Commission on that one. Can I get a motion in the affirmative for amendment number 4, please?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve amendment number 4 as written.
Okay, I have a motion, can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded. Heather, the roll?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Schindler,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Yes.
and Mr. Lingenfelter.
Yes. Okay, amendment number 5, also no additional comments or additions from the Lake County Planning Commission for section number 16.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept Amendment 5 as written.
Have a motion made and a
Oh.
second,
I'll second that.
and seconded. Heather, the roll, please.
Mr. Schindler,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. Lingenfelter.
Yes. Okay, amendment number 6, which would be section 22. And were there any comments to be added there?
Where it is.
22, no, there are not. That was
Or is it 22?
Yes, that was to be
Oh.
accepted as submitted, so we have no additional comments. I would like a motion in the affirmative for amendment number 6.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept Amendment 6 as written.
Motion made, seconded.
I second.
Motion has been seconded. Heather, the roll, please.
Mr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Schindler,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. Lingenfelter.
Yes. Okay, amendment number 7, which would be section 29.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve amendment number 7 as written with one exception as recommended by the Lake County Planning and Development, adjusting the parking lot aisle for parallel spaces from 25 feet to 14 feet as discussed.
Very good.
I think there was more. Roll to the next page.
Oh, on the next page. Correct. There
There were
are
4 of them, I think.
also, okay. Also, changing the restaurant to restaurant counter service in table 29.09A as recommended by Lake County Planning and Community Development. Also, change 29.10A3 to read parking areas are measured outside the right-of-way as recommended by the county. Also, delete 29.10A5, 29.10A5, and 29.10A7. Retain only one because they say the same thing as recommended. And change Ohio Basic Building Code to all applicable state and federal laws in section 2904 as recommended by the county.
Very good, Rich, thank you. May I have a second?
I will second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Heather, the roll, please.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. Schindler,
Yes.
Mr. Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Lingenfelter?
Yes. Okay, amendment number 8, which would be covering section 34. There was, I don't
That is,
believe-
there's no comments. That's,
Yeah, there was-
that's the last page. of it.
Right, there were no
Oh,
recommendations by the Lake County Planning and Community Development. Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve amendment number 8 as written.
You have a motion made, second?
Second?
Motion's been seconded. Heather, the roll?
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
Yes,
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Lingenfelter?
Yes. Okay, amendment number 9, which is section 36, site plan review. And we do have some recommendations by the Lake County Planning Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept amendment number 9 as written, with the recommendation from the Lake County Planning Commission and from staff, that we define the landscaping professional. It was discussed that it was Ohio certified or registered. Heather, is that the correct?
I'm sorry, we're
red
actually on
one
section,
ahead, you're
but
one
we're on
ahead.
section 36 right
Oh.
now. We jumped ahead.
Yeah, you-
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're up one, right?
You're good.
Amendment number.
Okay.
It's hard.
Okay, we had one there, correct?
We had
Which is
3.
3.
The first, the 4th, and the 5th,
Okay.
Wait,
Number
what?
5th.
right?
First, I didn't have one.
I think you decided not to do number 1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, we decided not to do number 1? Oh, that's right, we did. I'm sorry.
just the fourth
Yeah,
was
that's
what
right.
I had.
Just the
yeah.
4th and the 5th then.
The fifth was
The
already
fifth
on
was
there.
already included.
All right,
So just the 4th.
right, so actually
Okay.
just the 4th.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept amendment number 9, as written with the recommendation from staff and the planning commission to require land use and zoning information on adjacent properties to the site plan. We did. okay,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, that's good, very good, thank you. We have a motion made, can I get a second, please?
Second?
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Heather, the roll?
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
yes,
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
And Mr. Lingenfelter?
Yes. Okay, amendment number 10, which covers section 37. And I think that is one of the other ones that
Yes,
was
that's the other one that's
left
on the very
without
last
comment.
page.
Right, that's also without comment, so it'll be, I will accept a motion in the affirmative as submitted.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept amendment 10 as written.
A motion made and seconded,
I'll
please.
second that.
Seconded. Heather, the roll?
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
yes,
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Lingenfelter?
Yes. Okay, amendment number 11, which is section 38. Now I get to go.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept amendment number 11, section 38, as written with the recommendation from the planning commission and staff, that we define other landscape professional as registered within the state of Ohio.
Very good. The motion made, can I get a second, please?
I second,
Seconded. Heather, the roll?
Mr. Schindler?
yes,
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
And Mr. Lingenfelter?
Yes. Okay, that concludes item number 2 on the agenda. Very good work, everyone involved. Heather, you did a nice job. Guys, you did a lot of work on this, and it's nice to be able to finally put this behind us. I appreciate everybody's efforts. Okay, item number 3 on the agenda is to review the 2018 meeting schedule and deadline dates. Which was this fancy schmancy little piece of paper here with all the,
So, Mr. Chairman, I just had a few comments on there.
sure,
Okay.
please
I don't know
comment.
if we've done this in the past before, but it's come to my attention that now we need zoning amendment submittal dates in order to coincide better with our regular meeting schedule. So we've proposed in here deadline dates, filing deadline dates for text and map, text and/or map amendment applications that are submitted by application. So this doesn't affect anything that the zoning commission initiates or that the trustees may certify to you, but if somebody wants to submit their own application, this is the date that they file or that will accept it, which will then trigger the 20, the time frame for getting on your agenda and things like that.
Hold on a second, I'm sorry.
I'm
I
sorry.
didn't see this. Is this like, you're telling the citizens that they have to file by this date?
Yeah, can we do that?
No.
No, we can't? Oh.
They have to be able to file whenever
At
they
any
want.
time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well.
If you'd had your meeting packet, you'd know this.
If I had had it, I would.
I didn't know that. Okay, all right, so maybe we can't do that, okay. Good to know.
I'm sorry, we're sticklers, but
Yeah.
your revised code does require, once an application has been submitted, it has to be set for hearing within 20, no later than 40 days.
Okay.
So it may require a special meeting to be called. I'm sorry. It's what the
Okay.
revised code requires, so.
Okay, so we'll revise that and eliminate that column on the left.
What was a good idea?
Yeah. Because I have people asking me, what is the deadline to submit? So
I
there
know.
really isn't one.
There really
Can't
isn't,
really
it's just a
stop
matter
it.
of how quickly it has to move after it's submitted.
Yeah.
But people have to have the ability to petition to rezone at any time.
Okay, okay, okay.
You certainly could tell them, you could suggest if we get it by this day, then you could hear it at this.
Okay.
at this
Well, I was
meeting.
just saying, can you just work backwards and say this is the date
Yeah.
that coincides with our normal meeting cadence, so
Right.
they wanted to know that, they can use
And
it
if
as
Yeah.
a
you say,
guideline?
if I
Yeah.
receive it by this day, then it can be.
Yeah, okay. It just can't be a deadline, okay.
So this would be great for you.
Okay, I'll keep that, yeah, all right. But as far as just our regular meetings for 2018, Claudia, our office assistant, usually does this calendar for us, and she noticed that the July meeting is on July 3rd, so, which is a Tuesday, obviously, right by a holiday, so I was just wondering if the commission wanted to still have it on July 3rd, or if you wanted to move that meeting in July due to any kind of vacations or anything like that. I'm fine either way. I just wanted to point out that one was right near a holiday where people might be out of town, so. If you guys wanted to make that decision, we could change it for that month, or we could just keep it as is.
We just keep it as is and, if we run into any issues. I mean, there's a lot of times, there isn't really a whole lot on the agenda. We don't meet much in the summer anyway.
Okay.
So if we're not, if there's no need for a meeting, then we want to target the 3rd.
Okay,
To not have one,
that's fine. I mean,
July 3rd. No, I think we just leave them as is and we just deal with them as they come up.
okay,
Like you said, we always have the option to change a date and convene at another time, so we can, to accommodate for the holidays and things like that. So I think we'll be all right.
okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so that's item number 3 on the agenda. Item number 4 is the approval of minutes of the December 5th, 2017 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the minutes of the December 5th, 2017 meeting as written.
Have a motion made. Take a second.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any opposed?
And I will abstain.
One abstention? Okay, item number 5 on the agenda is the correspondence report by zoning commission members. Frank?
I haven't per se had anyone call me, but I've heard a lot of reference about the traffic situation up on 44, people complaining still that it was our fault, that the state made changes on 44 there, where you have to go straight down and then make the light and come all the way back to go to the hospital. People complaining about that was our fault. So other than that, general discussions I hear at church and shopping, nothing major.
Morgan?
No.
Rich?
Nothing formal, but I've had several favorable comments about the way Crowd Crossing is developing. People are pretty happy with that, the way it's gone so far.
Jerry?
No correspondence, Mr. Chairman.
No? Nothing for me. Heather, have you heard anything about riders at all? That's been kind of a bone of, or kind of a common question lately about it. Is anything coming towards riders at
I
this
don't
point?
know anything.
Anybody, no overtures, no?
I know that the trustees were trying to actively
Right,
pursue some potential occupants, and I think the owner of the property gave some indication that there was some conversations with a potential grocer, but they couldn't divulge anything because they weren't
Right.
any kind of signed contract or anything
Right.
yet, so.
okay. All right, next meeting for the zoning commission will be February
Excuse me.
the 6th, I see.
We're actually going to have our special,
Oh, that's right.
I
Should
forgot
take
one,
that
yeah.
back. Well, our next meeting will be, our next meeting, not scheduled, or it is scheduled, will be on, what will it be?
January 23rd.
January 23rd.
That will be Tuesday, January 23rd, which will be 3 weeks from today. January 23rd, at 7 o'clock here. And then we'll go back to our regularly scheduled process. Any other questions or issues we'd like to cover today, guys? Anything? Stephanie, thanks for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
Appreciate your counsel. Anything else? Meeting's adjourned.